Dawn of War 4 just recently dropped its second trailer, as well as a developer interview, and it's looking pretty damn good. Therefore, it's time to launch a holy hype or shite inquisition to guard our souls from the promises of fake hypo-heresy, and ask the important questions such as, will we finally get a modern, polished and God forbid, good Warhammer 40k real-time strategy experience? Because anyone who knows anything about Warhammer 40k and video games will understand that it's actually a grade A Techno-Heresy, that a modern strategy game befitting the setting doesn't already exist, over and above the recent remake of Dawn of War 1, which, while positively received by most fans, is, at the end of the day, still a 21-year-old game. What? But I digress, for we ask more questions, such as, who exactly are Dawn of War 4 developers King Art Games, and what kingishly artful games are they known for? What gives them the warrant of trade to take on the mantle of producing a brand new Dawn of War title? Will they milk our gene seed dry post-release with soulless and benign DLCs? Or will the DLCs be fruitfully full of content and come in at a decent value proposition to the average player, if we get DLCs at all? Will the release of Dawn of War 4 in 2026 usher in a new golden era of competitive real-time strategy goodness for years to come? Well, handsome viewers, recalibrate your ocular implants, set your Vox Servitor to Void Hammer time. Grab a tin of your favorite flavored corpse starch and let's find out if... Quick disclaimer, these are the mad ramblings of a PC game and Warhammer fan who is using this channel as a vehicle to dive deep into the universes of all things Warhammer. Take everything I say with a pinch of warp energy. I, like you, have no deeper insights beyond that of the common man. Now, the Warhammer franchise, particularly 40k, but let's not ignore the work done by Creative Assembly and Sega with Total War Warhammers 1 through 3, is having a bit of a renaissance in the video game space at the moment. Titles like Mechanicus and Rogue Trader both maintain very positive ratings on Steam and are both due to receive successes in the form of Mechanicus 2 and Dark Heresy, respectively. The latter of which has me so excited that I'll be starting a Rogue Trader blind playthrough on this channel very soon as a way to truly dive balls deep into the grim darkness of the far future, and you're welcome to come with me.
So discard the weakness of your decayed recommended feed, aspire to the certainty of the like button, and embrace the sanctity of the blessed subscriber. Praise be to the algorithm Messiah.
Excuse me. Anyway, Darktide also upped the ante by bringing the Vermintide formula that worked so well for 2 of Fatshark's past releases into the 41st millennium. And it's also been received incredibly well by players the world over, regardless of what some unhinged Steam reviewers with well over 250 hours in the game might tell you. You've played the game for over 250 hours. You didn't do that to write a thorough Steam review. You did that because you were having fun and you ultimately got your money's worth. Let's be real. Then Space Marine 2 came along and hit harder than almost all other titles combined, giving us one of the best modern interpretations of experiencing the Warhammer 40k universe from the perspective of an Astartes. Since its release, Space Marine 2 has undoubtedly become the most popular gateway drug for gamers and casual audiences to get involved in even more 40k media, as well as the tabletop itself. But why is all of this relevant to Dawn of War 4? Well, aside from a select few other titles over the years, historically speaking, when it comes to video games, let's just say Games Workshop have treated the 40k license with the same air and grace that a teenager treats their genitals. Yes, the standards were so low that it felt like anyone with 2 brain cells and the ability to smash their face on a keyboard and call it coding qualified for a Warhammer 40k license if they asked for it, and the amount of bad games that the setting has endured over the last 2 decades is nothing short of embarrassing. There have been few exceptions to this overarching rule, such as the original Dawn of War 1 and its sequel. Regardless, any gamer with an ounce of respect for their time should approach any new Warhammer 40k video game releases as cautiously as possible, and that's why I'm making this video, so we can work through what we know about Dawn of War 4 so far and figure out if the hype is founded. The bloody Emperor himself knows we're all due a decent Warhammer 40k real-time strategy game, and by all the logic in the universe, Dawn of War 4 should be it. Although I myself am still holding out hope for a Total War Warhammer 40k announcement by Creative Assembly in December later this year, but that's a topic for another video. So, what do we know about Dawn of War 4 so far? Well, aside from being the third entry in the Dawn of War franchise, the release of the game will feature 4 factions: the Space Marines, the Orks, the Necrons, and for the first time in a Dawn of War title, the Adeptus Mechanicus. While I am saddened by the lack of chaos slated for release, there is past evidence for quantifiable hope, as Dawn of War 4 could potentially follow in the footsteps of the first game in this series, which saw 3 expansion packs released over the course of its lifetime, ultimately culminating in a 40k real-time strategy title that included 9 factions, namely the Space Marines, Chaos, Eldar, Dark Eldar, Orks, Imperial Guard, Necrons, the Tau Empire, and the Nuns with Guns. It would be nothing short of awesome if we could see a similar roster appear over time with Dawn of War 4. However, if we take the same scope of content the original game saw and mix it with the context of modern gaming today, where expansion packs have gone out of style and have made way for much more controversial and bottom-line padding DLCs, it becomes incredibly easy to imagine a post-Dawn of War release world where either one of 2 things is going to happen. Either we get half-assed, money-grubbing DLC releases that totally miss the mark and don't come close to anything anyone would consider a reasonable value proposition that adds piecemeal factions to the core Dawn of War 4 experience at some ridiculous price point, but nonetheless still manages to flesh out the faction roster to hopefully come close to or surpass what was accomplished in the first Dawn of War game. Or they stay true to the formula of the first game, and instead of just getting new factions, they flesh out each DLC release alongside high-quality, narratively driven campaigns. Even better if we received chunky, rich patches to keep the game fresh and exciting by evolving whatever metas begin dictating competitive play, ensuring healthy balance between the different possible matchups and including more game modes and types like the rumored PvE co-op modes coming to the base game. There's a lot of potential here, and I don't believe that it's totally unfounded to think that they might go as big and as far as they possibly can with it. When it comes to adapting a property like Warhammer 40k to a real-time strategy or grand strategy game for that matter, you don't have to look far to see how successful CA and Sega have been with Total War Warhammer 3. I'm a huge fan of Total War Warhammer, and here we're talking about 8.5 years of releases of 3 Total War fantasy battle games and an absolute onslaught of DLC and free LC in the form of entire factions, new legendary lords, heroes, new units and extended rosters, gameplay updates, existing faction gameplay reworks, and features, finally all merging everything together in one huge Immortal Empires campaign map. The value proposition has varied drastically from specific DLC to DLC, but ultimately I think most fans are content with the sheer amount of content that's now available to us in Total War Warhammer 3 once everything is said and done. It's a formula that Creative Assembly have managed to maintain over the years and sustain one of, if not the most successful Warhammer video game franchises ever. In fact, it would be ridiculously stupid to not try to recreate this success with the 40k brand, and whether that's going to be done with Dawn of War 4 or a potential Total War Warhammer 40k remains to be seen. However, staying on track with this Inquisition, what else has Dawn of War 4 got going for it? So far we know that each base game faction is due to have its own story-based campaign, with the developers allegedly planning for over 40 minutes of cinematic cutscenes. Most likely the majority will be rendered in-engine. I doubt we'll be seeing old-school Blizzard quality levels of cinematics between missions, but hey, I can dream. In terms of fundamental game design philosophy, the developers have stated often and loudly that Dawn of War 1 is their guiding star for the overall direction that they want to take the game in. And most everyone is interpreting this as a good thing. However, I remain skeptical of the fact that this is something I would say just as often and just as loudly if I was only in it for a quick nostalgic cash grab. But Voidhammer Time Guy, I do not hear you squeal like an autistic squig. How can you say that? Clearly there's a lot of dedication and passion behind this project. Calm down, handsome viewer. We're mature gamers with exceptional taste. We should temper our optimism with healthy doses of skepticism every now and then. For the business of developing video games is just that. A business. Keep that in mind lest we fall to heretical hype bullshittery, and just remember the track record of the average Warhammer 40k video game being what it is. And with that, we can eloquently segue to an overview of the developers themselves. King Art Games. A brief look at their development history shows off quite a variety of game genres that any self-respecting Warhammer fan might be highly skeptical of. But that's just game development for you. The important takeaway here is that they've been operating as a unified studio with about 15 years of experience, and the obvious title under their belt that many believe qualify them for taking on the task of creating a fourth Dawn of War is the successfully kickstarted alternate World War I history, steampunk-inspired... Oh, come on, that's just steampunk with extra steps and chemicals. Real-time strategy game Iron Harvest. I actually remember seeing the concept art for Iron Harvest many years ago and thinking, man, that looks sick. And honestly, the imagery was so striking, I feel like it stuck with me. However, it turns out that artist Jakub Różalski is responsible for the aesthetic of this world, which was originally a board game called Scythe. King Art Games adopted this aesthetic for what would become Iron Harvest, which was originally a Kickstarter project from March 2018 that successfully funded $1.3 million and got a release just 2 years later in September of 2020. The game was received positively by players and appeared to be a solid and enjoyable experience. However, for me at least, after seeing that concept art so many years ago, the title somehow just faded into obscurity and never really resurfaced on my radar until now. So for this inquisitorial video, I did my duty. I installed and loaded up Iron Harvest, and I gotta say, it's an incredibly decent, solid title. This is definitely the DNA by which I believe Dawn of War 4 will evolve from. It reminds me of simpler times and feels like a piece of gaming history when things weren't as complex, over-engineered and overproduced as they are today. Also, within the first 3 minutes of starting the game, this girl was getting maliciously attacked by a group of boys in a mock snowball fight. So from a Warhammer 40k perspective, developers King Art Studios definitely passed the vibe check.
Ow!
Another title developed by King Art Games that vaguely fits the theme of wars and hammers is Battle Worlds Kronos, which is a turn-based strategy game that looks like Civilization and Red Alert 3 had a weird cheap baby. Visually, it looks engaging enough, but ultimately I think this is a title that suffered from small budget syndrome and next to zero marketing. I just wanted to bring it up because I find it funny how weirdly confusing and coincidental these names are. Rogue Trader, a Warhammer title, takes place in the Kronos Expanse. Dawn of War takes place on the planet of Kronos, and King Art Games developed a game called Battle World Kronos. I mean, what the fuck, am I right? Anyway, while Iron Harvest is a great title in its own right, what seemed to peeve most of the invested player base off, who probably supported the title throughout its early Kickstarter days as well as its post-release state on Steam, is that after 2 brief DLCs released within under a year of the base game's launch, King Art just kind of dropped support for Iron Harvest. But I think this was ultimately inevitable, as from a business perspective it just didn't pull in the sustainable numbers to justify the support. I believe the game has soul, a truly wonderful aesthetic, and it's definitely recommended for at least a single-player campaign playthrough, but was ultimately destined to falter into obscurity and never really kick off as the next big competitive RTS esport. And that brings us to the conclusion of our patented Voidhammer Time Inquisition of Dawn of War 4. Within this title's future, there are one of 2 possible outcomes. At worst, we could be getting an Iron Harvest 2.0 with a Warhammer 40k Dawn of War 4 skin slapped on, culminating in a pretty but shallow real-time strategy game without much depth and little to no post-launch support or roadmap. So there's a very real concern here that the developers cash in by taking all of our Warhammer 40k hype lunch money and ride off into the sunset after pulling off a quick dirty nostalgia cash grab, as we all come to the realization that the game itself is bad once the rose-tinted glasses slide off our sad, wet, pathetic faces. Or Dawn of War 4 could be the first part of a genuinely exciting reconstitution of an important piece of the real-time strategy genre, all set in the perfect setting of Warhammer 40k, providing Dawn of War 1 and 2 fans with a modern installment that we've all always wanted. I'm not saying the developers need to create the next StarCraft, but at the very least, all they realistically need to do is nurture a healthy competitive scene, maintain matchup balance for PvP games, and provide exciting content and updates for the rumored PvE co-op mode. Let metas evolve and communicate with the incredibly excited community of gamers who are sincerely eager to enjoy another Dawn of War title.
Let the Techno-Heresy, that is a lack of decent modern 40k real-time strategy game, come to an end.
Wow, what an insightful, useful, and entertaining inquisition into the current state of the anticipational sentiment for Dawn of War 4. But most importantly, how does it rank on the hype or shite-o-meter? I'm feeling pretty hyped. I mean, after I made this video, I heard something about the developers making thousands of synced up kill animations, so like, fuck everything I just said, that shit sounds f***ing awesome. Thanks for watching. If there are any other topics you think require a Voidhammer Time Inquisition, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, the next hype or shite video will probably be about Alcat's next CRPG, Dark Heresy. Oh boy, I cannot wait. So thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.